My name is Mark Bishop. I'm running for mayor of Aberdeen Township with my two running mates, Lauren Ramos and Michael LaCourte. And today we're here to talk about taxes.
It's good to see you. I'm Senator Declan O'Scanlan, representing District 13, which includes Aberdeen, and happy to be here talking about taxes and your opponent's misrepresentation of the taxes in Aberdeen and who's responsible for it.
The first thing that I want to ask you is about the claim that the annual assessment program is purely a Republican policy with no Democrat support, and that if I'm running on the Republican ticket, I am not even allowed to question the program or talk about it.
We've been absolutely transparent about this program. This is all political posturing on the part, really, of Greg Cannon and then other people that he sucks into that orbit to echo his misrepresentations in this program. And I've spoken directly with Greg. He's an elected official in my district. I talk to all my elected officials. We've spoken about this. He knows he's being political. He knows he's lying about the program. It's either that or he doesn't understand how taxes work. Either one of those things would be disqualifying for anyone running for mayor, but he knows that. So no, we are totally transparent about it. I've had people in my office talking about it for years, and the idea that it's purely Republican is absolute garbage and easy to prove. His good buddy, Democrat Senator Vin Gopal, who's also a friend of mine, fully endorses the program, enthusiastically supports it. Why? Because unlike what Greg Cannon says, it makes absolute sense. It does not increase property taxes. The overall level of property taxes is set by Greg Cannon, your municipal officials, the county, and your schools. The county's been pretty steady. The increases have come from schools and the municipal budget. That's what drives property taxes. What the ADP does is fairly allot each person's property taxes so they pay their fair share. If you're against the ADP, what you're essentially saying to half the people of Aberdeen, you should pay your taxes, and then you should pay part of my taxes or part of someone else, your neighbor's taxes. Nobody would back that, which is why virtually every other town in Monmouth County has embraced the program. Those people have taken the time to understand it, they get it, and they're honest with their residents. Unlike Greg Cannon, who has politicized it, gone out of his way to upset his residents. It really is a shame.
So over the years, I've been as critical as anybody else about the ADP program. And, the viewers can scroll back through social media and find that if they choose to. So one of the things that I did before making a decision to run for office was I had reached out to you to either better understand the program or to see how we can get out of it.
Exactly the questions you should have been asking. And look, and I don't blame you. You, like a lot of people in Aberdeen, from a lot of folks in Aberdeen, fell prey to Greg Cannon's mischaracterization and lies about the program. How do we know that that's true, that they're misrepresentations and lies? Virtually every other town that's in the ADP now has embraced it. This is Democrat and Republican, by the way, learned how it works, realized it's the most efficient and fair way to allot taxes. It does not drive taxes up, and they embrace it. To argue against the program is to argue that you should pay your share of taxes, but you also should pay a share of someone else's taxes, your neighbor's taxes. Nobody believes that's fair. Everybody should pay their taxes based on their fair share of their property value and the percentage that value makes up of the entire town. So you took the time to pay attention and to learn about it. And you learned that Greg is full of crap and he's misrepresenting the program. Or he doesn't understand how property taxes work. I guess that's another possibility. Either one of those, if one of them must be true, should be disqualifying to someone running for mayor of any town. But look, throw in as well that, again, it's got Democrat and Republican support. Vin Gopal, Greg Cannon's good buddy and Democrat senator, has embraced the program, endorsed the program, and praised the program. Greg should probably talk to his friend. Maybe he can educate him about how property taxes work. Once that happens, well, then we'll know. He will either change his tune about the program and admit he's lied about it.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding after our initial conversation and the more that I learned about the program is, let's say that my house is valued at $100,000 and my neighbor's house is valued at $100,000. and we have our assessments every 10 years. My neighbor decides to add an addition and a patio and a deck and redo the entire house, and I leave mine untouched. And now his house is worth $200,000, where mine's worth $100,000. It would take 10 years to catch that and equalize the amount of property taxes that we're both paying.
It could.
And that when you're doing it on an annual basis, as soon as those renovations are complete and you realize that that house is now more valuable because of the improvements that they made or whatever it may be, and my house is less valuable, I will be paying a smaller share of the tax rate. Now that the tax bills go up because the budgets keep going up. So that's why if you don't make improvements to your home, you're probably still seeing an increase, but that's due to the budgets increasing, not because of the annual assessments or the values.
Yeah. Look, under the way Greg Cannon tells people it works is if the assessed value of the whole town goes up, your property taxes go up. That's not how it works. If everything else remains equal, all the school budgets, local budgets, county budgets would remain equal. Let's just keep one variable here. If the value of the town doubled, your tax rate would be cut in half. You pay the same amount of taxes. What's driving the taxes overall within the town is the municipal budget, municipal spending. Schools have gone up as well. The counties remained relatively stable. It's run by Republicans after all. So that's how it works. And if there's an area of town that depreciates quicker, they will pay a higher percentage of the overall amount of taxes. That's only fair. That's how the New Jersey State Constitution envisions it. They very specifically said everyone should pay their fair share of taxes. And again, why, if you look out over the country, 80% of the country does some form of what we do, because the more accurate your assessments are, the more fair the tax applications are. And that should be what we all strive for. Everyone pays their fair share.
So the biggest claim that our opponents, Aberdeen Forward, and namely Greg Cannon, are making this election season is that if Aberdeen residents elect him as mayor and his team, that they are going to get us out of the annual assessment program. So my question is that possible? And if so, how would he be able to accomplish that?
No, it's not possible. The window has closed. There was a brief period of time right initially when there was some confusion about how the program worked, where there was an ability to get out. Some towns are out, but they have all the downsides of the old system. They don't have lower taxes, and they have these for 8 or 9 years at a time. Taxes are being allotted unfairly. More than half the people in those towns are overpaying their taxes. That's not how the system is designed to work. Today, we can make sure everybody pays their fair share on a yearly basis. So you can't get out, and you'd be foolish to want to get out. And if there were a compelling reason to get out, you'd see en masse towns talking about getting out and getting out. That ain't happening. The only place this is really an issue is Aberdeen. Why? Because Greg Cannon sees it as a good political issue, and he doesn't mind using his residents and upsetting his residents and upsetting them by his Misrepresentations program for political gain. That stinks. So can't get out, and you don't want to get out anyway. As we've explained, the program is the most efficient, fair way to allot property taxes in exactly the ratio that they're supposed to be.
During that window that they could have opted out, was there any attempts made, or have they ever attempted to get out of the program in the past? Well,
they talk about it when it's politically convenient. When it was first implemented, there wasn't. It was as soon as Greg perceived some political benefit to this, that's when all this hullabaloo came about. And he's continued to lie to his own residents and use them for his political gain, and use their fear of property taxes to manipulate them into continuing to vote for him. That's a pretty awful thing to do, but he doesn't seem to have any compunction about it.
This program has been implemented here and in other places for many years now. Do you see other towns that are trying to enter into the program?
Look, there's the rest of the country is going more towards wanting to make sure that assessments are as up to date as possible, as in real time as possible. And with technology, we could do that now. You could do, yearly examinations of trends to make sure that you're paying your fair share of taxes and that your neighbor is, and you're not paying a portion of your neighbor's taxes. So throughout the country, we see assessing going in this direction. You see it, and the ratings companies talk about it, and the movement is towards using technology to make assessments fair and up to date and as accurate in real time as possible. The old way of having 5, 10, 15-year-old inaccurate assessments is past. And anybody who understands how this works gets that and believes that's the right way to go.
A number of years ago, I had found, doing a little bit of research on this, that this had come up in the past and that there was a meeting between Aberdeen Township, Greg Cannon, and the rest of the council and the county tax board. Are you aware of that meeting? And
it wasn't the whole council. It was Greg and a couple other members, I think, maybe the administrator at the time. And they had a meeting. And behind closed doors, they essentially admitted that the program works as it's intended, and that, you read between the lines what was reported on the record to the tax board about the meeting. They essentially admitted that their opposition was political. So yes, there was discussion, but again, behind closed doors, they admitted that this is all essentially phony political manipulation.
So they had an opportunity to get out of the program if they thought that it wasn't working.
And they
discussed it.
Were educated about it and decided not to get out.
Yeah, they discussed it with the county tax board and probably had an opportunity to get out at that point and opted not to. And now that it's past the point in which they can opt out, they're making this promise. And I think that they're trying to pursue some sort of legal remedy. And if there's no precedent to get out of the program through that, it's going to tie us up into lawsuits for years and cost taxpayers even more money for something that we already know is unachievable. That
will result in an unfair tax burden on the people of Aberdeen. It's ridiculous on its face, and it's stupid. So go ahead, go down that path, screw your own residents, and pay the price politically later. But that would be a shame. And again, it's a false promise. It's as bogus and phony as their contentions about the program in the first place.
So, knowing that we can't get out of this program, and I'm sure that my opponents know this as well, why do you think that they're making this thing?
Because it's politically convenient. Look at the boogeyman in the corner. Don't look at us. And we're going to save you from this boogeyman that we created. It's politics 101. It's fairly smart politics, but it's amoral and it's dishonest. So that's what it is. It's all about the politics. And again, if what they're contending about this program is true, there'll be people with pitchforks all over Monmouth County, all over, I think Somerset does as well, all over the rest of the country where they do this. It isn't happening. It's only a fabrication and a demonization, a false demonization on the part of Greg Cannon and his cronies that is causing this issue in Aberdeen, where it exists magically nowhere else. Again, in order for what they contend to be true, it implies that they have more insight than hundreds of elected officials, Democrat and Republican local elected officials throughout Monmouth County and the other counties doing this. Greg's smarter somehow than those hundreds of people that are letting their residents get screwed. No, it's the other way around. They're all right. They understand the program, and Greg is the one who either doesn't understand it or is purposely lying for the political gain.
I'll tell you, when I was criticizing the program, I'll tell you what one of my biggest contentions with it was I was seeing advertisements from Aberdeen Forward every election cycle that said that we've lowered your tax rate again this year, while I'm looking at my tax bill and it had gone up substantially. And I had attributed that to the annual assessment program essentially giving Aberdeen Forward the opportunity to point to the annual assessments as what drives the tax bill up while saying that they were the ones that were able to reduce the rate. Can you explain a little bit about what would really affect those things, or
Well,
why that misconception, why that would be a misconception?
again, the overall taxes are determined not by the assessment program. They're determined by the overall budget of the municipality, which has gone up dramatically, or fairly significantly, over the past 10 years. I don't think they're contending they have cut their budget the past 10 years. And I think it's gone up substantially in the last couple of years. You would know that better than I. That is what is driving your taxes more, and the schools as well. I think there's been some increase in the schools. I haven't gone into those numbers, but your overall taxes throughout the town and the overall tax burden is not affected at all by the assessment program. Again, if values double, but budgets aren't increased by the schools, the county, or the locals, your tax rate would be cut in half, and your taxes would remain the same. So if you live in a house where you've done dramatic improvements, or it's a region that is appreciating more, you would fairly have to absorb a greater percentage of the overall tax burden. That's how the system is supposed to work. And by the way, while that is happening, someone else's house isn't appreciating as fast as the average in the town, and their taxes would go down. That's how the system is supposed to work. And ultimately, it works that way even when you have assessments every 10 years. It's just a dramatic shock when it happens every 10 years, rather than fairly and incrementally every one of those years. So that's another benefit of the program.
So when I see my tax bill go up, but the tax rate has gone down because the values have increased in town, Aberdeen Forward is telling me and the other residents in town that they reduced the rate, and the annual assessment increased the bill. It sounds like that's backwards. It sounds like the budgets set by Aberdeen Forward increased your bill, and the annual assessment program is what reduced the rate.
That's true. The rate now, again, under the old program, you had this, it was all static. Now it's dynamic. If you're going to adjust values every year, you need to adjust rates as well. So there isn't a windfall of income that comes. It's just not how the system works. The overall tax burden is driven by the school, municipal, and county budgets. And again, the county is pretty much irrelevant because they've stayed pretty constant. It's the schools and the municipal budget, which have been controlled by Greg Cannon for a long time, that drive up overall property taxes. That's what happens. Again, if you have different regions appreciating in slightly different rates, you're going to see that equalize, and that's fair, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But your overarching increases in your taxes in Aberdeen are driven by the people designing your budgets, the municipal government and the schools.
Okay, so let me ask you a way that I think that people will understand. If the value of your house was $100 and you are paying $10 in taxes, that's a 10% tax rate. If we experience COVID and the prices soaring and any other factors that drives the prices up, and now your home value doubles to $200.
Yep.
If the budget remained the same, what would happen with the tax rate?
The tax rate would be cut in half. Still pay the same $10 because that's what the budgets call for the school.
So the rate would go from 10% to 5%, and you would still pay $10.
Unlike what Greg Cannon is hinting to people that, the value of your house doubles, your taxes are going to double. BS.
Now let's do that same scenario a different way. Your house is valued at $100. You're paying $10 in tax this year. There's no valuation change next year. Your house is still worth $100, but the budgets went up by 20%. Are you still paying $10 in tax?
Now you're going to be paying $12 if it goes up by 20%. That is exactly right. It's a good illustration.
Okay.
And that's what's driving people's tax bills. Overall, there will be some people whose houses are appreciating faster than others. Okay. But the overarching tax impact is all being driven by your local municipal and school board officials. Look, sometimes, certainly with schools, with aid from the state being what it is, there's other drivers, but it's being driven by those budgets.
So I'll tell you, that's something else that Aberdeen Forward points their finger at, is the schools. And they point to the fact that the school budget is the largest portion of our tax bill, which is true, and the fact that they do not control the school's budget, which I think is partially true. They don't have full control over the budget, but I do think that when they're signing off on the pilot agreements and things that are happening in town that affect our
Agreeing
school,
for development that's bringing more kids into the schools that the schools then have to pay to educate, they do have an indirect impact on the school's burden of services and paying for them. Now, that's a fair point.
and I would say that if they want to lay the blame on the school board, or on the school district, that they should have a seat at the table when these development agreements are being negotiated.
There probably should be that, yes. There absolutely should be some discussion between the folks granting the pilots, the municipal folks, and the people running the schools who might be impacted by this massive influx of population, and population that includes school children. There should be that discussion. If that isn't happening, shame on your local officials.
It's not happening, and it doesn't always have to happen. If we're going to do a pilot agreement on senior housing, we're going to do a pilot agreement on commercial space, the school board probably doesn't need to be at those meetings.
That's true. It's
But
really when you're going to be bringing in population that includes school children, there absolutely should be a communication. There's no requirement that happen. There probably should be, but just for planning purposes and out of common decency, you think you'd want all the people that are going to be impacted to be involved in the decision.
It's just common sense.
Yes.
So one issue that I've been hearing from residents, especially on the Cliffwood and Cliffwood Beach side of town, is that, this is the most affordable part of our town. So the house values are at a lower point than other portions of the town. But it's also an area where we're giving blanket tax abatements to all new construction, and there's a concentration of pilot programs and new development that's going on in the area. And we can talk about whether those decisions are good or bad separately, but it is driving the values of the houses in this part of town up at a higher rate than other parts of town. And I think that that's because it's a lower starting point, and then there's just excess development that's being concentrated.
Gentrification and it's, I get it. Look, the ADP will capture that incrementally over time, but eventually it's going to catch up with them one way or another. If you were to wait 3 years, 5 years to capture that in a townwide revaluation in 3-5 years, they'll get crushed with massive tax increases in 1 year. You're better off knowing what your real tax obligation is every year and smaller incrementally than having that massive 1 year crushing shock of massive tax increase. The ADP is still better for that region as well, for that reason.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think that that's something that we could probably and should be taken care of through planning and zoning. I mean, some of these projects and the size of them, I think that maybe if we had more modestly sized projects spread more evenly throughout town, then you wouldn't have these concentrated areas that are being hit harder than other areas.
And that's fair. That's a real planning issue. And hopefully the new Bishop administration will embrace that. And I think you will. But that is some detailed, intricate planning processes. And you should look at that. And look, if we're talking about pilots, there's a lot of pilots being given out by Aberdeen. You only want to do a pilot if it makes the difference between a project happening or not happening. And then you hold some control over what the project looks like as well. If those things aren't happening, or if the project would happen anyway and they're still giving a pilot, well, then you're needlessly giving a break to a developer and putting that tax burden on the backs of all the other existing Aberdeen residents. Not good policy.
So I'll tell you, the Glassworks project in town, I think that maybe some people misunderstand my views on that project and the pilot that it was received. Greg Cannon and Aberdeen Forward, they are justifying the pilots that were given by saying we needed the affordable housing and that there was some environmental cleanup that needed to be done. And I'll tell you, if we had issued a 15-year pilot agreement on the affordable housing, those 110 units, I think that would have sufficiently covered the cost of the land remediation, and the project would have moved forward and everybody would have won. The part that they're not talking about is the Forge at Glassworks. It's 170 units of market rate luxury apartments. They're about $3,700 a month each at this point. That has its own pilot agreement. That pilot agreement cost the taxpayers, the developer benefit portion, I think was in the realm of $15 or $18 million. The township benefit $3.8 million. That's additional money that the municipal portion of our budget receives, where they would have gotten $200,000 a year if that project was taxed the way that I pay property taxes. They get about $420,000. But the most important part is that the schools that would have received $800,000 a year are receiving nothing. And that project is contributing 120 children to our schools at a cost of roughly $2.1 million a year.
Yeah, well, look, you have an acute understanding of these things. So the voters of Aberdeen ought to pay attention to that, because it sounds like Aberdeen needs people with a more acute understanding of how these things work. I'm not intimately familiar with the on-the-ground conditions, but if you're giving a major significant pilot to luxury developments that were going to happen anyway, that is bad policy. And that is taking money out of the hands of sitting Aberdeen voters who are already there and giving a break to the people living in these luxury apartments.
I'll tell you,
that's bad policy.
I'll tell you also, the one part of the project that the community was excited about, and the one reason that the community didn't fight against the development of this project, was that there was supposed to be a lot of retail space. That retail space would have provided business opportunities for our residents.
No schools.
It would have not contributed kids to the schools. It would provide job opportunities, business opportunities, recreation for our teams, which is definitely needed in that area.
And what are you going to tell me? That's not happening?
Not only was that portion removed, and where my opponent is telling everybody that he removed that portion because it was no longer needed and he wanted to scale back the project. The part that he's not sharing is that when that portion was removed, it was replaced with 199 additional units with the affordable, the 20% affordable unit requirement being removed. So that's another 199 market rate apartments or units that are going.
That developer made a killing. You can't blame him for getting everything he get, but it sounds like Aberdeen was taken advantage of. That's what it sounds like. Again, I don't know the specifics, but if everything you're telling me is true, that sounds like your leadership fell down on the job.
Yeah, you know, I'm not anti-pilot. I'm not anti-development. I think development's good. I think development is supposed to enhance your community and benefit your community, but we need to look at the development that's going on with the community that we have here already at the forefront of our thought. We need to make sure that when we are doing these developments, that we're thinking about the community and the people that live here first, and making sure that we're not putting additional burdens on them, that the development that's coming into town is not just benefiting the developers. You know, it's fine that these companies want to come into our town and profit, and I'm glad that they find Aberdeen so desirable to do so. But the local government, it's their responsibility to make sure that these developments are beneficial to the community as well. So I am not anti-pilot, I'm not anti-development, I am pro-smart development.
And that's exactly the right place to be. That's what the Aberdeen voters should want in their elected officials. You're not going to blanket be against things when it's not that binary. It's where does it make sense? Where can we do smart planning? And where do we need pilots and where do we not need pilots? You're exactly right. And that's the right way to approach it.
I'll tell you also, in my line of business, we deal with these projects all the time. And I've spoken to some developers in neighboring towns that are doing a tremendous amount of development, that are eligible for pilots and opting not to take them. And when I spoke with them, the reason was because they like to come into a community and stay there for a while and really help raise the community up. They like to work with the community in a way that benefits the community and helps lower tax rates. And they know that pilots don't achieve that when they're not needed. So they may come into an area and use a small pilot on one project and then build several others that they were eligible and never even submit an application. And those are the types of developers that we want to attract into our
It's good you're speaking about that. Forward thinking.
So while I'm here, is there anything else that you think people should know about the annual assessment program? Is there
Covered
anything
it
we missed?
pretty well. If people are paying attention, they'll get it. And they should resist believing the people who have consistently lied to them about this program and manipulated them for their political gain. Again, this isn't happening anywhere else. If what Greg Cannon has been saying now for years were true, you'd see these issues all over the county, all over the state, wherever else they're doing this. It's not happening. This is purely a fabrication of Greg, and that's a shame. That's unfortunate that he's willing to upset his own constituents to drive them to vote for him. That kind of sucks.
Well, again, I just want to thank you for taking the time. I think it's really important, not just to help educate me, but to educate the voters in Aberdeen.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you very much. And remember to vote November 4th for Mark Bishop for mayor, Lauren Ramos, and Michael LaCourte for town council. Thanks.
Good luck.